here today to talk about Work Design Magazine's The Next Work Environment competition. And the idea behind this competition is really to try to force a more expanded way of thinking about our work environments in light of everything that we're going through with this COVID-19 crisis. And I'm really fortunate today to be here with Rachel Gutter. Rachel is the president of the International WELL Building Insititute, and that's a public benefit corporation with a mission to improve human health and well-being through the built environment. Rachel came to that through the USGBC, the Green Building Council, where she spent nearly a decade there, working on some very impressive projects. That included $275 billion worth of investments in LEED certified and educational facilities, and 750,000 volunteers in 73 countries. So, Rachel, that's a pretty impressive resume.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I think my obsession is working at scale. So it's great to be working with you to think about how to scale some of these ideas that are floating around how we move forward in the recovery process in hosting this competition.
Good. Well, no, I'm excited. You've given us a lot of great ideas to help shape what this competition is. But let me ask you to start out and maybe give us a little bit about your background and some of the things that you're doing at the International WELL Building Insititute.
Sure. As you said, I spent quite some time at the U.S. Green Building Council as the founding director of the Center for Green Schools and the senior vice president of knowledge. And about 3.5 years ago, I migrated to the International WELL Building Insititute, along with a number of my colleagues at USGBC, including Rick Fedrizzi, who is the immediate past CEO of the U.S. Green Building Council and the founder. Now in my work at IWBI, we focus on a related but slightly different mission. So whereas LEED is focused on planetary health, first and foremost, we're focused on the health of people and the ways in which spaces and places where we live our lives can be adapted such that we can all thrive. So I started out at IWBI as the Chief Product Officer. I worked with the team to revamp WELL into the new version of the system, WELL version 2. Also launched the portfolio program, and then about 2 years ago, I took on the role as president.
Now, let me ask you, how has the whole COVID-19 crisis, affected you, and the work that you guys are doing?
It's changed everything overnight. We saw the change coming. We have over 20 staff members spread across 3 cities in China. And when the first cases of COVID-19 were being identified in the United States, my staff back in China had already been under quarantine for almost 2 months. And so we felt really ready in a lot of ways when COVID-19 hit US soil. When we decided, the day that we decided and announced to staff that we were going to close our office, that was the very same day that we decided to press pause on bringing WELL version 2 out of pilot by way of a vote from our governance council. This is something we've been sprinting toward for, almost 2 years. We've been working toward this deadline. Let's do with our community a full scan of the WELL system and ask ourselves, what else can we do within WELL that will support our customers and fortify their buildings and their organizations in the fight against COVID-19? So we stood up an IWBI COVID-19 task force. Nearly 600 volunteers from 30 countries raised their hands to participate. And coming out of that task force are a whole series of new offerings that are going to start to debut to the market between now and the end of August.
I think you guys are in a unique position here, given the health and well-being and the strong connection to the built environment and just the dramatic change that we've all experienced with this whole coronavirus. So I would imagine coming out of that, there's a lot of things that you see that have potential to change.
Absolutely, but I also think that we're over projecting what the long-standing changes are going to be or what they should be. So I'm really trying to advocate for the design community to distinguish between the interventions that are relevant really only for an interim period, and those that have value as long-standing enhancements to our operations, management, and design. I'm of the mindset that once the threat of COVID-19 is eliminated, we have to have better preparedness measures, but we don't need to outlaw open office plans. We don't need to forbid handshakes and hugs. And I can see a little bit of that future, again, through our colleagues in China, where life is more or less returned to normal. So I'm getting photos of them with clients at plaque presentations where maybe 50% of the audience, they're inside. Maybe about 50% of the folks are wearing face masks, but they're sharing finger foods on a platter. They're giving hugs. They're sharing pens to sign ceremonial documents. Life hasn't changed that much now that they're going through a period of time when the threat of the virus and transmission is largely contained. On the other hand, there are a number of things that I think will come out of this chapter in our history that should absolutely be permanent. Why should we ever go to a public bathroom again and have to touch a surface? Why should we ever again say we can't afford to close our schools today because otherwise kids won't eat? That's not a good excuse anymore. So I think there'll be a lot of positive changes, and I hope that participants in this design competition can focus more on those positive changes, or at least articulate where strategies are being designated or indicated that we really shouldn't be adopting long-standing, like dedensification or the use of antibacterial soap and hand sanitizers. We don't want these things to be forever traditions.
Yeah, I think that we'll go through different phases, and I think you've kind of implied that, and I think as we start coming back to work now, it's almost as if there's a sort of policy behavior change, and then there's a physical environment change, you know. So, I'm just curious, I mean, as we come back, what do you see happening, and what do you recommend to people?
First of all, I would say you're absolutely right that there needs to be a bridging of and comprehensive communication across those that are tending to the buildings and those that are more directly tending to the people within the buildings. We cannot treat these as separate strands of effort anymore. So with WELL, for instance, we try and focus on the intersection of those strategies because we've really come to understand that, you have to simultaneously, to advance health and well-being in the built environment, address that which the building can do through design and operations and maintenance best practices, and that which the organization can do through programs, policies, and protocols. And COVID-19 really underscores that notion. It's all well and good to have a policy on PPE, but if you don't supply the right face masks and you don't tell people how to put them on and take them off safely, why do you have it in the first place? You can put a 6-foot rule in place on your manufacturing floor, but if you haven't actually modified the manufacturing practices and you still got people who have to work elbow to elbow, what's the point? There is no 6-foot rule. There's just a 6-foot aspiration or directive that nobody's going to be able to follow because they can't get their jobs done. So, I think that it's a critical missing component of a lot of the current COVID response plans that we're really missing out on comprehensive education and re-onboarding for both the building operators and managers and the occupants themselves. And that is especially true for COVID-19, because you cannot design your way out of this problem. The second you can have every system, every best practice, every policy in place, but the second that somebody doesn't cover their mouth when they sneeze, you've put everyone in their vicinity at risk.
Well, and it sounds like from the way you're describing it, every business has their own special or unique aspects that they have to worry about.
That's right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes design guidelines so complex. And I'm sure what will make this competition a challenge, because all of the choices, or many anyway, of the choices that we're making are site specific. It's a myth that 6 feet is right for every place and every building type. What are the ventilation rates like? What's air filtration look like? How close are people sitting together? What are the angle of the chairs? So many different nuanced things that now building owners and operators and designers are charged with really understanding. And sometimes not enough science to get all the way there. There's a lot of choices that we're having to make by intellectual leaps as we wait for science to fill in the details of COVID-19 specifically. This is one of the things that I think is a little bit frightening, because I don't think that there are enough experts on the built environment and COVID-19 to go around right now and help to answer all of these questions that really are going to be really nuanced and differ for every space type.
That kind of leads into my next question. What's your biggest concern as we go through this?
That we'll let fear take over our decision making. I think that this is a moment for immense hope and optimism, despite all of the pain and suffering and hardship that's happening right now. And I don't mean to diminish that. Working at an organization where our headquarters are in New York and our staff are scattered across basically many of the hardest hit areas in the world, I think that in many ways we'll come back from this stronger. I think that we're going to demonstrate to ourselves just how resilient we are. And I think if we allow ourselves to devolve into fear-based decision-making and fear-based messaging, that really is a much greater threat in long term than the virus itself. When we get back, I think we'll be even more open-minded about remote working, because we'll have proven to ourselves that not only could the productivity continue, but I can speak for my organization, we've never been more productive. I think if anything right now, we're worried about work-life boundaries. Do I think that the design of the space will change? I think it will change some, but I think what will change more for IWBI, because we are fortunate to be in a WELL Platinum tenant space, I think what will change is a lot of our policies and protocols. One of the ones that I think we, like so many organizations, are struggling with is how to accommodate for parents in this situation sufficiently. I think we moved so quickly to get remote work set up, and we instituted all these, workplace wellness best practices and ways to maintain our connectivity and our communication. But we're learning about ways in which we could have and will in the future be able to handle these things even better from the outset. A lot of different new measures that I hope we and others will put into place around preparedness, not just for COVID-19, but for other similar or different health-related challenges in the future.
I'm wondering if you could offer maybe some guidelines or suggestions or how they should frame the problem as they're working on these solutions.
Absolutely. We, first off, just published in the form of a document that outlines all of the different strategies pulled from across all 10 concepts of WELL that we believe have relevance in this moment. So it's not just looking at a lot of the design enhancements or operational enhancements on the facility side, but also some of the long-term strategies for prevention. What we've learned about COVID-19 is that obesity is a pre-existing condition. Asthma and heart disease are pre-existing conditions. And at a community scale, pollution is a pre-existing condition. So what that tells us is that part of our long-term preparedness strategy can't be solved by building upgrades. We have to be thinking about the kind of influence that we can have where we're really nudging people toward enhanced practices for tending to their own health and well-being, which ranges, as is covered by WELL, from physical activity and movement to nourishment to support for mental health and well-being and aspects of community connectivity. The building can help across all 4 of these fronts, but it can't be addressed in isolation.
I am so excited to have you participate, with us on this jury. I think you bring a very unique perspective. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and energy and effort. This has been a great conversation, and I'll look forward to continuing that dialogue with you as we move forward.
Me too. Thanks again for the invitation, and I'm really psyched to see what new ideas are born. I think it's a time of tremendous innovation and tremendous creation, and something that you embed in one of these proposals could be the next world-changing idea. So always excited to be a part of that.